Welcome, gather round the fireside and listen to a tale of Fionn McCool, Cullen, Deirdre of the Sorrows, Grainne Whale. From giants right down to fairies, of both the trooping and solitary, and those who are sometimes scary. Anything goes by the fireside. Yeah. Fireside, the Puka fireside, the Merrow fireside. Kings and queens fighting heroes, don't you run from the fun, there's no need to hide. Sit by the fireside. Fireside. Hello and welcome to Fireside, the Irish storytelling podcast. Each episode of Fireside, we take a story from folklore, mythology, retell it, have a chat about the tale itself and about the craft, culture and history of storytelling. My name is Kevin C. O'Lahan. I'm your host and your Fireside Bard. Welcome to episode 54 of the Irish storytelling podcast. We are coming to you as always from the beautiful surroundings of the Headstuff Podcast Network studios here in Dublin. The weather is finally, dare I say it, starting to get a little bit warmer, a little bit more of a stretch in the evening, and it's always a pleasure to come in here each and every week to bring you another dose of storytelling goodness. If this is your first time listening, you're very welcome along. We're diving right into the middle of the Ulster cycle at the moment, or towards the tail end of the Ulster cycle as it is now. So maybe listen to this and then see where we've come, and then go back to the very beginning, or at least the beginning of the Ulster cycle from about episode 48 to 50, and see what we've been building up to over the last 15 months or so. Was it about year and a quarter? And if you are a returning listener, thank you so much for your continued support. Please do continue to support us with ratings, subscriptions, reviews, wherever you get your podcasts. Please do follow me on Instagram at Fireside Bard. It's the best place for updates on the podcast, the live shows, and for things I'm working away on myself. And if you really are enjoying the podcast, you can, of course, subscribe to the Patreon at patreon.com/Fireside Podcast. Any and all contributions are welcome. They all go towards the live shows, to keeping this podcast going. Every little bit coming in makes this feel more and more like a concrete thing. So thank you so much to our current patrons, Ollie Gray, Connor Phelan, Cullen Vance, Kit Mallow, Carl Dry, and our top patron, Emily Brady. Thank you so much for your incredibly generous support, howsoever, and how whenever you want to continue that. But if you can't, or you have no desire to contribute to the Patreon, that is also absolutely fine. As I say, it's my favorite. It's an egalitarian model of kindness, and my favorite thing about this podcast is that it can go all around the world for free, and that it is accessible to anyone and everyone. And I will continue to write, record and release these podcasts as long as you are willing to listen to them. Next, if you are around Dublin in the next month, come along to our next live show. We are doing another Fireside Sessions. This time, our theme is Folk Friday. We are doing it on Good Friday, the 10th of April, right here in the podcast studios, Dublin's newest live venue, downstairs from when I record the podcast. It's where we had the Dublin Podcast Festival live show. It's a great space. I'm really excited to get back in there. We learned so much from the podcast festival, and it's great to be honing the Fireside Sessions as the live shows. That's something we want to do more and more on. If you haven't been to one before, you haven't heard of them, Fireside Sessions is the live show of the storytelling podcast. Mixes tales of folklore and mythology with the stories behind our greatest folk songs, all through the true and personal yarns of me, your host, and my very special guests who will be announced very soon. We'll have a musical guest or two for sure. So please join us for some tales, some tunes, and a tipple. The podcast studios is BYOB. So celebrate the fact that you can now buy Gargle in Ireland on Good Friday for only the second year. And join us at the podcast studios on Friday, the 10th of April for Fireside Sessions. But I will get to the story now. We are continuing the Ulster cycle of Irish mythology. We are in the final couple of stories now. I nearly thought this was going to be the last week, but then I remembered this story. I've said this a few times. I'm a massive fan of audiobooks, and I'm a big fan of Audible, and it's my favorite thing that I subscribe to. And there's an incredible series of Irish mythology audiobooks that you get. Is one set. It's just like a complete mythology, and it has 9 or 10 different mythologies from all around the world. Now, I've listened to about 4 or 5 of them at this stage. I've listened to it's Celtic, it's Greek, it's Norse, and it's Japanese so far. And the ones I don't know, it's definitely flawed in aspects. Sometimes the narrator works. There's about 2 or 3 different narrators. Sometimes the narrator works, sometimes it doesn't. Obviously, with the Celtic one, they're doing quite broad strokes, and their pronunciations aren't going to be fantastic. They're actually okay for this one. Now, I say that myself as not even a fluent Irish speaker myself, so I would have much more of a grasp of the language in terms of pronunciation, but I still get it wrong myself sometimes, because sometimes there are different ways and different dialects and regions and stuff, and sometimes I just get it wrong. But overall, this is an incredible project, and it's been great to listen to different versions of mythologies I knew about, and then some mythologies that I didn't know about at all. But in its broad strokes of the 4 cycles of Celtic mythology, when it does the Ulster cycle, this is one of the stories that it read. And then when I was researching on Bard mythologies again, it was this and the very final story of the Ulster cycle were the last 2 left. And this, after the Táin, this is actually the longest story in the cycle. So I've broken it down into 2 parts. But they are actually quite 2 nicely standalone parts, which is quite nice. And this, in that they're quite contained. But I'll get to the story now. We can chat a bit more afterwards. This is the Champion's Portion, Bicriu's Feast on Fireside. The Champion's Portion, Bicriu's Feast. Cuchulain's reputation as a champion was undeniable to anyone who has heard even one of his countless achievements. But one of the final times that Cuchulain's prowess as Ulster's greatest warrior was challenged was at the feast of a devious and bitter man named Bicriu. Bicriu was an Ulsterman who in his youth had taken a javelin to the kidney. Although he did not succumb to this wound, Bicriu never really healed from it, and it ruined his diet and constitution. For the remainder of his life, he could only eat simple foods like oats and eggs. This made him increasingly sour and bitter with age, as alongside storytelling and fighting, feasting was one of the Red Branch Knight's most beloved activities. Eventually, Bicriu's attitude became too much for Ulster to endure, and King Conchobar MacNassa banished Bicriu from Éamonn Macha and told him he must live the remainder of his life on his own land. He could remain in Ulster, but he must stay away from Éamonn Macha. Bicriu was a rich man and set to building a new fort of his very own. In this home, Bicriu constructed the most lavish feasting hall that Ulster had ever seen, greater even than Conchobar's own at Éamonn Macha. It could house more warriors. It had 9 chimneys leading to 9 roaring fireplaces. The cutlery and crockery were all golden, and tapestries of all of Ulster's achievements. When it was complete, Bicriu sent an invitation to Conchobar and his Red Branch Knights to honour him with their presence at the inaugural feast of Bicriu's banquet hall. "My lord wants his king to know that there is no hard feelings over the whole banishment thing," Bicriu's messenger told Conchobar when he arrived at Éamonn Macha. Conchobar was delighted by this offer, but Seneca, one of the oldest and wisest of his councillors, was suspicious. It had been Seneca that had advised for Bicriu's banishment from Éamonn Macha in the first place. "This doesn't seem right," Senka said. "The man can barely eat a bowl of porridge, and he builds a banquet hall. Also, Bicriu is a nasty piece of work. I don't trust that he has taken his banishment so alarmingly lightly. He's up to something." Concobar was wise enough to listen to advice from his counsellors, but he also dare not to be seen to refuse another man's generous offer of hospitality. So Senka devised a series of conditions for Concobar's attendance at Bicriu's feast. The main proviso being that Bicriu must be attended by 8 guards during the entire feast, and that he himself may not sit in the banquet hall itself until the feast was finished. Senka did not think Bicriu would agree to not even being allowed to attend his own feast, but much to his surprise, Bicriu agreed to all conditions. But Senka was correct to suspect the bitter Bicriu. After confirming King Concobar's attendance, Bicriu began the final stages of his plan. He personally went to visit a young warrior named LXIV. Despite his youth, Lera was one of the most accomplished warriors in Ulster, or certainly so Bicriu told him. The sour host personally invited Lera to the feast and told him that when dinner was served, the champion's portion should go to him. After a session of flattery from Bicriu, the impressionable Lera was inclined to agree. Next, Bicriu went to visit Conall Cearnach, another experienced, valued, and extremely confrontational warrior of the Red Branch Knights. "The champion's portion should be yours," said Bicriu. "You're damn right it should, and it will be mine," said Conall, "and I'll take the shirt off any man's back who says otherwise." Finally, Bicriu went to visit Cuchulainn. He extended the invitation and told him of the champion's share. "Well, that goes without saying," said the Hound of Ulster. "I have single-handedly fought off entire armies, and none of my fellow Ulstermen would deny me it. Even King Concobar would go without food himself to see me get the champion's share." Bicriu left Cuchulainn with a devious smile on his face. His plan was in motion. The day of the feast came, and King Concobar MacNassa and the entire host of the Red Branch Knights arrived at Bicriu's brand new feasting hall. Included were LXIV, Conall Cearnach, and Cuchulainn. They were in awe of the hall's scale and beauty, and when all were seated and ready to eat, Bicriu was escorted by his 8-strong guard out of the banquet hall, which he happily accepted, waiting as he was for the cat to be set amongst the pigeons. The feast was served, and when the champion's portion was prepared, and Cuchulainn licked his lips as he eyed it up, this is when the charioteer of LXIV stood up and declared that the champion's portion should go to his master. Then Conall Cearnach's charioteer disputed this, and the two began to argue, before Laig, the charioteer of Cuchulainn, stood and incredulously cut in. "Have you all lost your minds? Have none of you memory or sense? How can you even begin to think anybody else deserves the champion's portion other than Cuchulainn? He is the Hound of Ulster, and you are all mere foot soldiers. This is ridiculous." "I do not accept that," said Lera, rising from the table. "Ridiculous, is it?" said Conall, leaping to his feet. Then Cuchulainn calmly stood and said, "So be it," and all three drew their swords. A mighty fight took place between the 3 warriors, their bright swords sending sparks whenever they clashed. Senka told Concobar he should intervene. "This is a disgrace to the customs of feasting and hospitality to be fighting with fellow Ulstermen over something as trivial as a portion of food." Concobar then stood and unarmed walked into the middle of the fray. All 3 warriors halted once they saw their king. They sheathed their weapons and bowed before him. "The 3 of you should be ashamed. To fight like children at dinner time. Senka, what should be done about this matter?" Senka thought and then said, "Let the matter be decided another day. For tonight, Let the champion's portion be divided equally among all who gather here today. And it was done. All sat back down and enjoyed the vast and delicious feast, and the matter, for now, was postponed. Bicriu was in his room when he learned what had happened. He was furious that blood had not been spilled, but he wasn't defeated yet. When the feast was over, the women of the Red Branch all took a walk outside the grounds of the fort. Bicriu found the wife of Conall Cernach as she was out for her walk, and told her, "Whoever is the first to re-enter the banquet hall will be counted the first woman of Ulster, queen among all other women." Bicriu then found Lera's wife, and finally Emer, the wife of Cuchulainn, and told them each the same thing. Each of the three women, and their considerable respective trains of attending ladies, met some distance away from the banquet hall. They then began to walk back. None of them wanted to appear to be rushing, but each tried to walk at a brisk enough pace to lead the pack. When it was apparent they were all doing the same thing, it wasn't long before each woman had hiked up their skirt and was sprinting back to the finish line. The sound of the wives and waiting ladies charging towards the banquet hall sounded like an oncoming army to those assembled inside. The thunderous sound led Concobar to order the door to be barred, just at the very moment when Emer's hand touched the wood. To diffuse the tension, Senka suggested that rather than a foot race, it should be a war of words to decide which of the women was best. "None can match my beauty," claimed Conall's wife. "Not one comes close to my virtue," added Lera Buachs. Emer smiled condescendingly. "Shaped like cows and led by cows are all the women in Ulster when compared with Cuchulainn's wife." This made Cuchulainn smile, but caused such outrage among all others that swords were drawn once again. Conall and Lera began to punch and slash at the beams supporting the wall to open a passage for their respective wives. When Cuchulainn saw this, he walked to the wall and lifted the entire side of the house from its foundations, allowing Emer to cross underneath. This mighty deed sent shockwaves through the house, and as Bicriu looked out of a window from above at the chaos he had created, he was knocked from the window and into the dog's kennel below. This didn't do anything for his constitution. The host of the feast stormed back into the banquet hall, covered in dog muck. He was sore his plan had been thwarted again. He was sore that he was covered in filth. And he was most sore that his brand new feasting hall had been destroyed by the hacking and slashing of Lera and Conall, and by Cuchulainn lifting it from its foundations and dropping it again. Bicriu stood on the table. "You're not supposed to be here until we're done," called Senka. "To hell with that," said Bicriu. "I'll put a gassa on every man gathered here that none of you will be able to eat and drink again until my banquet hall is returned to its former glory." Everyone turned to look at Cuchulainn. The Hound of Ulster was tired. Not only was he worn out from all the bickering and house lifting, but as he said himself, "I tamed a new horse today, on Leah Macha, the Grey of Macha. She'll be the finest steed Ulster's ever seen, but she really took it out of me today." "She's a fine horse, to be fair," concurred the charioteer Laig. But all the assembled host pleaded with Cuchulainn to fix the house, so the Hound relented. Fortunately, because it was Cuchulainn, repairing the hall was as simple for him as adding a final brush of paint. With the feasting hall repaired, and Bicriu's feast at an end, the Red Branch Knights returned to Eamon Macha. Bicriu thought his plan had failed. He had not witnessed the blood he had thirsted for. But Bicriu had got into the heads of the three warriors, and Lera Buach, Conall Cernach, and Cuchulainn decided that the future right of the champion's portion would be decided another day. But it would be decided. To be continued. And that was part one of the story of the Champions portion on Fireside. So you see what I mean, that it's a two-parter, but that is still quite contained. We get the full story of this feast that seems to have an end, but then it hasn't. The matter hasn't been decided. The niggling question in each of these warriors' minds is still pestered and must be decided another day. There is, when it comes to the Ulster cycle, which of course has the Tawn in it, which we spent did we do 6 episodes? 6, no, yes, we did 6 episodes of it. Because the Tawn is the great epic cycle in the Ulster cycle, but that there are a good few other stories to it. There are stories that are very firmly before the Tawn, but then there are a few stories that could take place before, could take place after it. As is always the case with myths, there's always going to be some contradictions and clashes. This is one such story. This very much, there's a lot of the time that this feels like it's definitely before. Like, how possibly could Conall Cernach and Lara Buach think that they were greater warriors than Cuchulainn? The man is a god, after all, and single-handedly fought off the collected armies of Ireland for Ulster when everyone was in their birthing pangs. But there is also this theme, which I'm going to paraphrase from the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, brilliant Coen Brothers movie they made on Netflix last year, that you can't be top dog forever. And so there's a little bit of that theme, you know. Someone eventually does have to beat Cuchulainn. There's a bit of that in all the hero cycles of myth. Yet any of these undefeatable heroes, they nearly always are defeated eventually. And I kind of love it being as simple as getting the biggest plate at a feast, at getting the Champions portion. So with that regard, as I try to find out a little bit more about Lara Buach and Conall Cernach, who aren't two characters that I've noticed before. They, you know, maybe when I reread my sources of the Tawn, they may be names that'll turn up again. Likewise with the character of Seneca, who is very prominent in this story. He speaks far more than the king himself, and it's very much him that dictates everything. That he hasn't appeared before, certainly not in any form that I've noticed. We of course have had Fergus MacRoke as a counsellor to Conchobar before he left Ulster to go in exile in Connacht and ends up fighting against Ulster in the Tawn. So in one of the sources I had for this story on Bard Mythologies, it has it be Fergus MacRoke that is suspicious of Bicriu, and then Seneca who comes up with the plan. But in my head anyway, at least, because we are doing it chronologically in the podcast, I have it that this is after the Tawn, that this is towards the end of things, and that this is very much where we are putting it. So it kind of took Fergus MacRoke out of it so that he is not back there. Likewise, as we'll discover in the next part, Ailill and Maeve, the king and queen of Connacht, they do feature as part of this story, which I may or may not go into. I haven't decided if it's a part that I'll adapt, because it's quite strange. Everything's very civil between them, which again would make you think that it would have to be before, but if we're going to play it, that it is after, which I think it very much does work as much. I kind of like that. I love the idea of there being more of the Ulster cycle after the Tawn, because sometimes in some versions they do have Cuchulainn die at the end of the Tawn and have that be the end of it, which might be a more epic story. But there's something kind of interesting about this war to end all wars, that then life goes on afterwards. Again, it's very like the Odyssey. You have the Iliad, in which the Trojan War is fought. And then the Odyssey, as much as it is this great and incredible story of its own, is very much a story of life just continuing after war. Of these, like, they've been at this war for 10 years, but at the end, Helen of Troy goes back to Sparta with Menelaus, and Odysseus just visits them there, and life is just going on, and it's about Odysseus' own journey to just get on with life. So I love that idea of that here, of that after everyone has survived this, or those of them that have survived the Taun, that they just continue on with more activities. And so that's why it's nice that this is a story about food. I suppose the Taun was all fought over a cow, so it's the idea of such big consternations stemming from such simple things as a plate of food, which I think is wonderful. Leg always, Cuchulain's charioteer always delights me every time he features. He is featured so much more prominently in every story that he has been in than I would have expected for a character that basically nobody has heard of outside of people who would be quite well versed of Irish folklore. He always seems to have his own identity. He's always like really a real pal, real confident, real sticks up. And I, of course, add my own twist to him. I think I identify with Lake quite a lot, and I kind of feel fine saying that, because I'm sure if you go, I was like, God, I really see Cuchulainn in myself, or I see myself as Fionn McCool. It's like, how highly do you think of yourself that you think of yourself as the greatest of all people? But I kind of like Leg. Leg is just kind of there hanging out, charioteer. He's good at his job, just having a bit of crack. I dig that in him, and he always makes me smile whenever I see him appear. And finally, of course, we have Bicriu. We have this previously unheard of. Like this, I love this. I kind of saw him as a kind of Grima Wormtongue from Lord of the Rings, as this kind of slimy, slively, just like nasty guy, as in like, why is he around in the first place? Why did anyone ever trust him? Why wasn't he always banished? And him just having this Howard disposition because he can't eat properly because he was stabbed in the kidneys. It's wonderful. And it's the thing that I couldn't see happening in any other mythology. I can't explain why, but seems something quite Irish about it. I suppose it's the ridiculous being taken seriously, as if I could articulate it in any way. That's something that seems uniquely Irish. And I suppose you have that in the essence of the champion's fortune, of something inherently silly and absurd as a plate of food being led to all-out blows. That to me seems uniquely Irish, of such things being fought over something so ridiculous. Something very human, but I think I see that happening in Ireland 10 times a day. So that is us out of time. So I hope you enjoyed the podcast today. As always, thank you so much for your continued support. If you're a first-time listener, thank you so much for listening. I hope you continue to listen. Thank you so much to all our patrons, to Alan and Paddy here at Headstuff, to Jamie, my producer, for continuing to edit this podcast. Next week, we're going to go back to a folk tale before we conclude the second part of the Champions portion of Bicriu's Feast. We have plenty more to go. This story gets pure. It gets Greek, it gets Norse after this, so we kind of get really, really into it as we decided. We've got some trials ahead of us. We're going on a serious journey as we wind down the Ulster cycle of Irish mythology. Come to Fireside Sessions, Friday the 10th of April, here in the podcast studios. Get your tickets at eventbrite.ie. Join us for some tales, some tunes, and a tipple. It's BYOB. If you're around then, I would love to see anyone there. Thank you all so much for listening. I'll see you all next time, and you'll hear me next time around the fireside. Thank you and goodbye.
This podcast is part of the Headstuff Podcast Network.